Hi, my name's Jo Travers from the London Nutritionist. I'm a registered dietitian and I'm also the author of a new book called The Bone Strength Plan, which I'm going to talk today about. Now, I'm really lucky to be taking over the We Are Fit&Well Instagram page, so I'm really excited about that. And you can see this video afterwards uploaded, and also you can look at it on YouTube as well. So it will be available just in case you miss anything. Now, as I said, I'm going to talk about bone health and how you can protect your bones from deterioration, because as we get older, our bones start to deteriorate a little bit, and that sort of happens with all organs in the body. And bones are actually not really very different from any other part of our body. They are quite dynamic. They are changing all of the time, remodeling all of the time. So although we may think that bones are kind of like this inert thing that just keeps us upright, actually, that's not true at all. Bones have lots of jobs. So they act as a reservoir for minerals, but also they sort of do all sorts of things like have bone marrow in them. So bone marrow is where we make blood cells. So that's a really important function of bones that may not be quite so obvious. Calcium and phosphate are two minerals that are really important. And when we're talking about bones, that's what makes bones hard and strong. But also calcium and phosphate are used in other processes in the body too. So calcium, for example, is used as in electrical reactions. Now, if we don't have enough calcium through our diet, what happens is the calcium from the bones can be released into the bloodstream so that it can still perform all of those functions. Now, that's a real problem for bones because that makes bones weaker, and it's much, much quicker to break down bone than it is to build it back up. So actually, a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today is actually how you can protect your bones from being broken down, rather than talking about how to make your bones stronger. Because actually, once we get past a certain age, it becomes difficult for our body to lay down more bone. It takes much, much more effort and much, much more time to build new bone than it does to take it away. So we're going to really focus on how to protect the bone that we have at the moment. Okay, so first thing on my list is actually maintaining an appropriate weight for your height. Now, normally when dietitians and healthcare professionals are talking about weight and body mass index, we're often talking about, how if your body mass index is too high, then it can have a negative impact on your risk of things like of developing diabetes and heart disease and that kind of thing. But actually with bones, it's much more important that you are not underweight. So being underweight is a real predictor for poor bone health. And the reason for that is twofold. So one, it's a sign that you're probably not getting enough nutrients to support bones, because remember, bones are busy, they're doing a lot of stuff and they need a lot of nutrients. But also bones respond to weight. So the heavier you are, or the more weight you have to carry around, actually the stronger your bones are. And that's a really important thing that I really want you to take away, because it might, if we're constantly told that we shouldn't be too heavy, nobody ever remembers to say we shouldn't be too light either. We should weigh enough. It's really, really important. Okay, so that's the first thing. Now, if you wanted to check your BMI, to check whether you're in the healthy range or not, you can go to the NHS website and they have a BMI calculator on there. So you can just type in your age and your height and it will spill out a kind of really nice BMI thing for you. Now, BMI isn't the be all and end all, but it is a starting point. So being a good weight, not being underweight particularly, is really, really important. Okay, now the next thing on my list is eating a balanced and varied diet. So this is my favourite part, because it's basically that's what dietitians talk about all of the time. So eating a healthy, balanced diet, and the key here is balance, is so important for all aspects of health, but particularly for bones as well. So we need energy. Bones, like I said, are really energy hungry. They're doing a lot of things all of the time. They're making blood cells and hormones and all sorts of things. So we need to make sure that they've got enough energy. We get most of our energy from carbohydrates, and carbohydrates are things like bread, rice, pasta, potatoes, those kinds of things. Now, a key component of bone is collagen. So collagen is a protein, and we make proteins in our body from other proteins that we eat. So if we eat a piece of cheese, our body breaks down that piece of cheese into its constituent amino acids and then reshuffles them and remodels them into new proteins like collagen. So making sure we get enough protein in our diet is really important. And then vitamins and minerals, and we get lots of those from things like fruits and vegetables, particularly our water-soluble vitamins. And there are so many vitamins and minerals involved in bone health, whether it's zinc, which is used in different enzymes that allow bone cells to be built, or whether it's vitamin C, which acts as an antioxidant in order to mop up free radicals and stop damage to the DNA in our bones. Everything is involved in bones. It's really, really important. So getting plenty of fruits and vegetables and also whole grains, really important. Now, a really good tip for doing this is to use your hands. Now, a portion of fruit and veg is what you can fit in your cupped hand, and you need at least 5 of those a day. You need at least 4 to 5 portions of carbohydrates a day, and that's about the size of your fist. And then you need 2 to 3 portions of protein a day, and that's about the size of the palm of your hand. So protein is things like meat, fish, eggs, beans, lentils, chickpeas, those kinds of things. Fruit and veg can be anything, whether it's fresh, frozen, tinned, dried. They all contain vitamins and minerals, so you can have a variety of things. Now, another good way is when, in combination with those hand-sized measures, is to think about your plate at meal times. You fill half of your plate with veg or a mixture of fruit and veg, a quarter with carbohydrates, a quarter fist-sized portion of carbohydrate, and then a palm-sized portion of protein. And if you do that at breakfast, lunch and dinner, the chances of you getting everything you need and not too much of what you don't are really high. Now, I'm going to be talking about more specific foods as we go through, because my next thing is actually managing internal inflammation. Now, inflammation has become quite sort of well known recently because of its role in the worst outcomes of coronavirus. So when people have COVID-19 and they end up in intensive care, it is because the body's inflammatory systems are going on overdrive, and the inflammation is causing organ failure. And hopefully you'll be able to manage the inflammation by using anti-inflammatory drugs like dexamethasone, which you might have heard about. So that brings down inflammation in the body. Now, that's in a really kind of serious end of things, but actually on a really low level chronic inflammation in the body can cause all sorts of havoc. And actually it's one of the main causes of things like cancers and heart disease and diabetes, but also has a really big impact on our bone health too. Now, inflammation happens when the immune system is working, and the immune system works when there is stress in the body. So whether you have a cut on your hand, or there's something stressful happening at work, or you don't have enough nutrients in order to perform all of the functions that your body needs to perform, your body feels stress. It's under stress. There's stress going on. And when that happens, your immune system kicks in and tries to fix the problem. Now, if it fixes the problem quickly, then that's brilliant. But obviously with some of those things like stressful job or long-term nutrient deficiencies, that's very difficult for the immune system to fix. You have to fix that by changing your job or doing some stress management and making sure that you eat the right nutrients. And what can happen is, if that stress continues, what we end up with is chronic inflammation in the body. And that causes a lot of damage to lots of different organs, including bone. Now, one of the things that happens with stress is that there's a hormone called cortisol released. Now, cortisol does loads of different jobs in the body, but one of its jobs is to reduce inflammation. Now, when we have a little bit of cortisol, it can be really beneficial for our bones, but when we get too much of it, it can be really, really detrimental. And bones and hormones, there's lots and lots of hormones that affect our bones. I mean, it's pretty much everything. The reason that our bones do what they do is they're told to do it by hormones. And it's always a bit of a balancing act between the ones that are causing bones to get built and the ones that are causing bones to get broken down. So it's a really fine balancing act, and cortisol is one of the key hormones in that process. When we are stressed, our body releases cortisol, and that's a good thing for a little while, but if it ends up being chronic, it causes problems. Now, managing internal inflammation is actually, we can do quite a lot to manage it, and that sort of fits into a lot of the different key messages that I'm going to give you today. They all kind of come under this umbrella of managing inflammation. Now, there are some specific foods that help to bring down inflammation in the body, and those are things like plant foods, particularly things that have lots of phytonutrients in: berries, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, beans, lentils, nuts and seeds. All of these things that we know are healthy foods. Now, these phytonutrients act on inflammatory compounds in the body, so that it ends up bringing down inflammation. Now, there are some foods that also produce anti-inflammatory compounds when we eat them. So things like omega-3 is an example of this. So omega-3 we get from things like oily fish, but also from nuts and seeds. That, when we digest it, causes anti-inflammatory compounds to be produced, and that brings down inflammation in the body. So we've got things: fruits, vegetables, whole grains, oily fish, and nuts and seeds on the one side, which is anti-inflammatory. And then on the other side, we've got foods that cause inflammation. And these foods are things like refined carbohydrates, so particularly sugary foods. We've also got things like saturated fats, so that's fats that are solid at room temperature, and coconut oil, dripping, butter, lard contain large amounts of saturated fat in them. So all of this healthy eating advice, you should eat more plant foods, lots of fruit and vegetables and whole grains, is something that you've probably heard, but you may not have known why we have to do it. And it's because of the sort of balancing effect it has on inflammation in the body. And then all of these kind of unhealthy foods that we should eat in small amounts only are things like sugary foods and foods that are high in saturated fat. And the reason for that is that they can cause inflammation in the body. So as long as you have the balance right, you've got more anti-inflammatory foods than inflammatory foods, then you can help to bring down levels of inflammation in the body. So try and think about all of that healthy eating advice. Now, the other thing that you'll probably have heard a lot is that you should do some exercise. And hopefully, if you are watching the We Are Fit and Well Instagram page, then hopefully you have this idea already. Exercise is really good for us, and the reason it is really good for us, one of the reasons it's really good for us, not just for making sure our bones get strong and healthy, but also because it reduces inflammation in the body. So when your body is exercising, it starts everything flowing, and when things are flowing, your body works effectively. It works really effectively. So that's another really key point about exercise. Although we need exercise in order to make our bones strong, our body responds to extra weight, like weight-bearing exercise, and it also responds to impact sports, and there's lots of exercises in the book that will help you with those things. But it also kind of gets everything going and reduces that inflammation in the body. So far we've got maintaining an appropriate weight, eating a balanced diet, managing internal inflammation by eating good foods and eating less of the foods which cause inflammation. But there's another thing that's really, really key, and that's to avoid toxins. So toxins cause inflammation in the body. Things like smoking is probably the worst thing that you can do for your body, and giving up is like the best thing you can do ever. And actually we know that vaping is a much, much better thing to do than smoking. So all of those toxins in cigarette smoke are just causing lots and lots of damage to the DNA, which is increasing inflammation in the body constantly. It's putting the body under real stress. When you give up smoking, or if you switch to vaping, almost immediately that stress that the body is under starts to reduce, and it's not long until your body is actually sort of really recovering. So if you smoke, stop smoking. Definitely, it will really, really help your bones. We know that there's a really strong link between people who smoke and worse bone health. Now, on a similar vein, although not quite as serious, is alcohol. So it's unlikely that if you're drinking under 14 units a week, that alcohol will be having any negative impact on your health. But if you find, as many people have during lockdown, that drinking is going above that 14 units a week, actually it might be a good idea to just think about cutting down a little bit. And there's a really good app from DrinkAware, and you can find it on the App Store, or you can go to their website, which is drinkaware.co.uk, and download it from there. And you can use it to track your units. So I'd really recommend just having a go at it. And even if you can't get down to under 14 units a week, actually just reducing it by any is good. So it's not that you have to be perfect. Anything that you can improve on will help. So that's something that I would do. So as well as those inflammatory foods like saturated fats and high refined carbohydrates, we've also got things like smoking and toxins and air pollution too, although I think maybe air pollution has reduced somewhat since we've been into lockdown, which is good. But particularly I live in London, it can get a bit much sometimes. Now, the next thing is, as well as all of those things, there's still more that you can do. Sleep is really key to this. So your body needs sleep because at night when we are sleeping, your body is doing jobs that it can only do while you're asleep. So it can't do the repair and maintenance when you're out busy moving around and doing all the things that you do during the day. You have to be asleep for this repair and maintenance to happen. And if you don't sleep enough or your sleep quality is poor, what happens is it means that your body doesn't get through all of the jobs that it's got to do. And that means a backlog of jobs, and it also means extra stress in the body. Okay, so the body has all of these jobs that it needs to do, it can't do them, and so it means that we're not running on tip-top form. That causes stress, which, as we know, causes inflammation in the body. And there's a really strong link between disrupted sleep patterns and poor bone health. Now, this has been shown in research of shift workers, like nurses or factory workers, people that work nights. There's a twofold issue there. One is that the sleep pattern is disrupted and the quality of sleep is not so good. But also, it means if you're working nights, you get to see less daylight. Now, daylight is really important because of the vitamin D we get from sunlight. Now, sunlight, as it shines onto our skin, it makes vitamin D. So you get UV light shining on skin, it makes vitamin D. Now, vitamin D is a key nutrient for bones because it helps us to absorb calcium. And we know calcium is what makes our bones strong. So without enough vitamin D, we can't absorb enough calcium from our diet. So it doesn't matter, even if you're drinking gallons of milk every day, if you don't have enough vitamin D in your diet, you won't absorb any of that calcium and it won't be doing your bones any good at all. Now, vitamin D is one of the few nutrients that people are really commonly deficient in the UK particularly, but all over the Northern Hemisphere, because the sunlight is not that great at the best of times. We may not get very much sunlight even in the summer, but particularly in the winter months, the sun, not only are we covered up completely, the sun just isn't really strong enough to make that vitamin D. So it's recommended that people take a vitamin D supplement of 10 micrograms a day in order to make sure that they've got enough in their system. Now, also, vitamin D deficiency has been linked to inflammation. So you may have heard in the news that there's a bit of controversy going on about whether people should be supplemented with vitamin D routinely when they get admitted to hospital with COVID-19. And this has been a long-going discussion almost since the beginning of the pandemic, when people realised that actually most of the people in intensive care were coming in with low levels of vitamin D. Now, it might be that it's the low levels of vitamin D that's causing the increased inflammation that's making the outcomes of COVID-19 worse. We just don't know yet. It might not be that at all, but because so many people in the UK particularly are deficient in vitamin D, it just makes sense for everybody to take a supplement over the winter months. So it's not going to do you any harm, so it's a really good thing to do. Now, next on my list is to take steps to reduce stress. So I've talked about stress quite a lot, but the Buddhists have known this for hundreds and hundreds of years, that actually doing meditation can really help with a lot of health conditions. What it does is it gives your body some downtime, it gives your brain some downtime as well. So when you're meditating, you're not thinking a million thoughts all of the time. And if you are, you just need to practice more meditation. It does take practice. It's something that can be quite difficult to do. But just taking that time to breathe and switch off from the day. And breathing is surprisingly good at reducing inflammation in the body. It basically tells your body that there's nothing wrong here. I've got plenty of time to breathe in and breathe out. And that sends a message to the rest of your body going, nothing to see here. We're totally relaxed. When you're kind of stressed and panicked, oh my God, my internet doesn't work and I've got to do an IGTV live. Actually, you're automatically shallow breathing and you're in this state of heightened stress. And maybe if you've been living in a house with people for, pretty much a year, and you feel like you're a caged animal trapped in a house with lots of people that you just wish you could get away from, which might be you, it might be me. It is nice to kind of just take a moment, go and sit outside and breathe and let your body return to a kind of state of calm and tranquility. If you do that regularly, actually it can have a really positive impact on levels of inflammation in the body. So there are lots of things that we can do, and I'm just going to give you a kind of a recap of what I've talked about. So we're going to maintain appropriate weight for our height. So that is particularly important that you aren't underweight, because that has a really big impact on bone health. Eat a balanced and varied diet, including lots of fruits, vegetables, whole grains and plant-based proteins like beans and lentils and chickpeas and things like that. Manage internal inflammation by doing all of those other things that I've talked about, like getting enough sleep, making sure you're having plenty of phytonutrients from fruits and vegetables, doing regular exercise, weight-bearing exercise and impact exercise, but also anything that just gets the heart going and the blood flowing. That will help to reduce inflammation. Reducing stress by meditating, making sure you're not putting poisons into your body like smoking and too much alcohol, and also getting enough vitamin D. And that is basically a kind of a quick fire roundup of all of the things that you can do to help protect your bones from being broken down. And I wish you good luck with that. Now, this video is going to be it's going to be on YouTube and it's going to be on Instagram TV. So please feel free to dip back in. And if you have any questions at all, you can check out my Instagram page, which is at LDN Nutritionist. That's the London Nutritionist. Or you can email me at jo@thelondonnutritionist.co.uk. It was really nice to be here. Thank you very much for having me. And yeah, I hope to see you all soon.